People who have pretended to fall asleep. What's something interesting you've overheard? Story 1. I was dozing off in bed with my girlfriend when I heard her confess her love for me. She was pretty hammered, but she went into intricate detail about how she feels respected, enjoyed the sex, and sees a serious future with me. The following day, I got yelled at for not cuddling and told it was a significant issue. I don't think she even knew of her confession. Story 2. My mom told a friend via telephone. I thought my husband was cheating, so now I do it too. Still didn't know what to do. Edit, my father has not been fooled, and it's proven. My mom is just stupid. They're getting divorced now. Story 3. I was drunk at a party and couldn't fathom the world, so I lay down and closed my eyes in a dark room. I heard two of my friends come in. One came over to me and poked me in the ribs, then said, "It's fine, he's asleep." Then proceeded to talk about how both of them were cheating on their boyfriends and who at the party they wanted to fuck. Story 4. A French girl I met in a hostel came to where I was sleeping and sat there. I had just cut it off with her, so I pretended to be asleep for a few minutes. She just mumbled random shit. She was pretty drunk. Finally, what got me up was when, in the cutest French accent, she told me she was going to set me on fire in my sleep. I should have mentioned that, yeah, I did sleep with her again after that. Sometimes you have to do messed up shit to stay not on fire. Story 5. When I was a kid, my mom would make my brother and I nap for like 45 minutes. I pretended I was sleeping and heard my mom talking on the phone to my grandma. During the conversation, I assumed my grandma asked what my brother and I were up to because she said Hully's brother was sleeping and Hully was pretending to be asleep. I was like, fuck. She said she knew I was faking because my mouth was closed and slightly open whenever I slept. So ever since that day, I keep my mouth slightly open whenever I'm pretending to be asleep. Story 6. I remember a little kid, being 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 a little kid. I couldn't sleep on Christmas Eve. So during this sleepless night, when my parents thought I was asleep, I heard my dad say, "Where do you think we should hide the new puppy?" Of course, that was on the top of my list, so I was excited about getting a puppy. So they talked for a good 20 minutes about the puppy, saying things like, how should we keep it from barking before he finds him? Before I dozed off. The following day, I discovered that my parents knew I was awake and decided to fuck with me. Unfortunately, there was no goddamn puppy. I got a Game Boy though, so it wasn't too bad. Story 7. I was spending the night at a friend's house. I'm a guy. She's a girl who brought my friend over because we were out partying. We all slept in the same room. I was lying on the floor near my friend when I heard my friend Andrea call my name, wanting to sleep. I ignored her, not moving, to which she responded, "Okay, Andy, I think he's asleep. Come here." About 5 minutes later, I heard the bed squeaking and her soft moans. One of them sneezed about 15 minutes into it, to which I responded, "Bless you." They immediately stopped. 10 out of 10 and would do it again. Story 8. When I was 6, I remember staying up late without my babysitter realizing it while my parents were out. When they came home, I was so worried about getting into trouble for still being awake that I pretended to be asleep. Mom came into the room asking whether or not I was awake. I stayed quiet, and then she just sat down on my bed. She was silent for what I felt like forever, but was probably only a couple of minutes before she bent over, stroked my hair, and kissed the top of my head, while telling me how much she loved me and how much I meant to her, and then she tucked the covers around me tighter and left. To this day, it was my favorite memory of her, and one I never shared with anyone. Story 9. I was in this messed up relationship with my ex-husband when I was pregnant with my second kid. We had a roommate, female, but we would all have sex with each other because we were young and free-spirited or something. Anyway, I pretended to be asleep one night because I didn't feel like having sex that night and didn't want to turn anybody down or make an excuse. So my ex-husband and the roommate talked in the next room. The bedroom door was open so that I could hear them pretty clearly. And she asked him why he married me anyway. His response, I didn't know what else to do at that point. It seemed like the next logical step, and I took it. I honestly wish I hadn't done it, and I wish I were single, now living life, but now I have this fucking family, and I'm not sure how I'll get out. Story 10. My mom did this once when a friend of her father came around to visit. She was tired and pretended to fall asleep on the sofa because she didn't want to be spoken to. So her father and his friend proceeded to talk about the war. This is World War II and they're Polish. This friend was sent to the border between Poland and Ukraine, and neighboring Ukrainians attacked some villages. For some reason, I still need to figure it out. He said they killed people by sawing them in half and loads of other gruesome things she wouldn't tell me. Story 11. When I was 8, I overheard Santa eating cookies and drinking milk on Christmas Eve. Later, he opened the fridge, ate a large chunk of cake, and ran around the living room. smearing the cake everywhere. Santa was our dog. Story 12. Two good friends, a guy and a girl, and we were all sleeping in a waterbed. After a hard night of drinking, everyone knew she was head over heels for him, but she always told me he didn't think of her like that. So it wasn't a big deal all passing out on the same bed. I woke up, the waterbed reminded you of those two making out and some possible heavy petting. I was stuck. Please wake up, ruin something, pretend to sleep, and hope it doesn't escalate. I chose the latter. It didn't escalate. I was the best man at their wedding, and now they have 2 children. Story 13. When I attempted suicide at 13, I pretended to be asleep in my hospital bed. My parents believed I was, and I heard my mom say to my dad, first my brother, now her, "What am I doing wrong?" It broke my heart because she's a wonderful mother and always has been. Our family has lousy genetics regarding mental illness. I'll never forget those words, and I constantly try to prove to her the fantastic job she's done. Story 14. When I was 14, I went on a Caribbean cruise with my mom, grandma, aunt, and cousin. I was sharing a room with my mom and grandma, and one morning I woke up to them arguing, and my mom crying. I pretended to be asleep because it would have been extremely awkward to get out of bed in the middle of all that. My mom called my grandma out on all the times she abandoned her and her brother and sister during their childhood, quite a few times. It was something I knew about before, but the stuff my mom was saying to my grandma was insane. Of course, my grandma denied none of it, but tried to absolve responsibility. Story 15. I was at a small house party, and after everyone went to bed, my bro and I slept in the living room all alone. I slept on the couch, and my bro put a blanket on the floor for himself. I was only lying down, maybe 5 minutes, when the girl he was flirting with all night came to lay with him. They then proceeded to start fucking right next to me, pretty loudly. Then she says, "Wait, is he asleep?" Then I continue faking as he flashes his phone light on my face and says yes. So they fucked twice while I was stuck listening to my brother talk dirty and her moaning and fucking noises for a few hours. Probably not a few hours, but it felt like that because I had to piss like crazy the whole time and was too embarrassed to get up. Next year, they threw the party again, and my bro told me to come with him, and I told him I heard everything last time, and he said, "Oh, I knew you were awake, but I didn't give a fuck." Story 16. When I was 7, I was lying in my bed 4 days before Christmas, after my dad dropped me off at my mom's for a visit, and my dad came in to talk to my mom and stepdad about how I would spend time with each of them on Christmas. I remember laying awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing my stepfather talk about how he would kill my dad if it weren't for me and get the fuck out of his house and all this other bullshit. I love my dad more than anything in the world, and I knew from a young age that I was his primary source of happiness. So hearing him walk out and the door close broke my heart. Story 17. I had a joint birthday party with another girl when I was still in elementary school because she chose to do hers on my birthday weekend, when her actual birthday was a couple of weeks before. We went swimming and back to her place for a sleepover. After movies and all that, for whatever reason, I pretended to fall asleep. Shortly after, all of my friends started to talk about how much they didn't like my dad and thought it was creepy that he was throwing everyone around in the pool. It kind of broke my heart because my dad is a paraplegic. He had always done this with us in the pool because it was the only place where he had the freedom to play with us like that.